All right, everybody, welcome back to the Film School podcast. V, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
It's great to have you on. And I know you've been extremely busy. I think you've been busy for a long time, but specifically busy for the last year with your Makeup Academy. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things on this show, obviously, I love to talk about the work that people have done, but I also like to go back to the very beginning and talk about early influences, because it's one thing to talk to people about what they make. It's another thing to ask them, why do they make the things that they make? So can you tell me a little bit about the first time that you watched a film and it put some spark in you to go, I want to try to copy this. I want to do something like this?
When I was very small, before I even knew, what a makeup artist was or anything, I was really fascinated by watching monster movies on TV. My mother had no idea why I liked it, but I was just fascinated with the fact that you could change a human being into something else. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So, way back then I thought, oh God, I want to do that when I grow up. And fortunately for me, or not so fortunately, because he didn't really help me, but my next door neighbor from the time I was like 3 until I was 12 was a makeup artist.
Oh, wow.
And come to find out just recently, even he was actually one of the makeup artists that did the original Planet of the Apes, was one of the 6 or 7 makeup artists that was on those films. Every Halloween he would make up his daughter and myself, and we, she'd always want to be a fairy or a princess, and I would always want to be a monster of some sort. So he would, oblige and do it. And I used to always say, oh, Mr. Latito, I want to do what you do when I grow up. And it was always like, yeah, sure, kid. Yeah, right. Because back then, women were not makeup artists. They were hairdressers, or they could do body makeup, but they were never makeup artists. And I'm not really sure if that was like a written law or just an unwritten law that that's just the way it was or whatever. Because when I wound up getting into the union in the early 70s, there wasn't a stipulation that I couldn't be a man to get in. So like I said, I'm not really sure if that was ever a written law or if they just sort of had to like let that go immediately when they had to start letting people into the union, or what happened. But I got in, and I was kind of an anomaly. And like these older makeup guys would always hire me to come on their show. Yeah, they were checking me out to see if I could do anything, so it was kind of crazy. But
as you were talking about wanting to go into the professional side, and from the early on, you're like, this is what I want to do when I grow up. Did your family support that? Or did they say, that's really nice, here's nursing school, or here's a law degree that you can pursue?
I don't know that they discouraged me, but it wasn't anything that was promoted. By any stretch of the imagination. It was just such a weird thing for me to want to do for them. My mother, unbeknownst to me, my mother was working in the film industry for like huge executives. I never knew it, until I got much older. But my father was a designer engineer for Lockheed, and he was, so he was working on rockets and stuff. And, me wanting to be a makeup artist was like, what does that mean?
Right.
So I wasn't discouraged, except for the fact that I was always told, no, you can't do that. You have to know somebody. And I said, well, I do know somebody, but it didn't seem to help. But it wasn't until, I went to an all girls Catholic high school that was geared for going into, business colleges and, that whole thing. And I finally just said to my mom and dad, I said, you know what, you guys don't waste your money. It's not what I want to do. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know, but it doesn't have anything to do with any of those college classes that you think I'm going to take, Right. So I said, can I just take a break here and try to figure it out?
Yeah.
So I went to a fashion merchandising school, and I realized then that, oh no, this is not for me. As much as I like to make costumes and do all that stuff, these people were nut jobs. And I just, no, I didn't want to be involved. So at that point, because I was involved doing clothing of some sort, I opened up a vintage clothing store, and I started doing stuff for rock bands and saving clothes for different rock bands. And I just happened to get married in the interim to somebody in the rock business, and he introduced me to like the Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all these guys. And I was really involved in the music industry, like on the side kind of, And I started doing some stuff for this one little band in Los Angeles who wanted to look like spacemen, I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. So I was cutting their hair and doing weird makeups on them and making really cool space costumes for him. And they said, this is all well and good, but we really want to have big brains and pointed ears and stuff like you see on Star Trek and, Outer Limits and all this stuff. And I thought, okay, yeah, that's really cool. I said, this is what I really want to do. So I said, I tell you what, let me go see if I can figure out how to make this stuff and we'll get into it, and they said, okay. I started going to science fiction conventions, and back then they were Star Trek conventions back then,
right?
San Diego, like at the El Cid Hotel, I think, or something.
They weren't what they are now, for sure.
They were not what they are now. But everybody was all dressed up like Star Trek people and stuff, and I just happened to see this group of guys walking around in Planet of the Apes costumes and in full regalia, full ape regalia. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. That looks so real, like right out of the movies. So I went up to the guys and I said, hey, you guys, I said, where did you get those masks? And they looked at me all indignant, and they said, oh, these aren't masks. These are makeups. And I went, even better. Where did you get them? And they said, well, we made them. And I said, hey, can you teach me how to do that stuff? And the five of them kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, but you're a girl. And I said, yeah, I know. Isn't it fabulous? So one thing led to another. And I kind of wound up falling in love with one of the guys. And I said goodbye to the rock bands. And I just started learning how to do that. And the man that I met was Steve Neill, who still does things in the business, but he's shifted into different categories. But so he taught me pretty much what he knew about making them. And he didn't really like to be around a lot of people. So he was better off in the lab and making everything, but I didn't want to be in there. I didn't like it. I wrecked my fingernails, it got me dirty and it smelled bad. Yeah. And I really got sick of ruining every oven and every apartment we had with foam latex. So I said, I'll just go and put everything on. You make it and I'll put it on. So we sort of became known as a team of, working together, and one thing led to another, and eventually I got into the union and he wasn't interested, so he kept doing what he was doing.
Yeah,
I got in the union. At
this point, was there any kind of makeup school, or because when you listen to old interviews, or you listen see a Jack Pierce, or all these different pioneers in this world, it seems like it wasn't an option. It wasn't like, oh, let me go learn. It was just, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to go figure out how to do this.
Well, there really weren't makeup schools like there are now. There was Elegance International, but they were more like a beauty school.
Right.
But I think they did start teaching a little bit of movie makeup. I'm not sure, because I know Greg Cannon went there and he learned how to make these bald caps that he and I eventually started making together. But it wasn't really something that, somebody was going there to learn how to do movie makeup,
Yeah, right.
So not really. We pretty much had to learn, we all had a couple of books and look at the books and we, try things out. Yeah. And I get calls that, before I got in the union, we'd all hang out in Rick Baker's garage, all five of us that knew how to do that stuff at the time.
Yeah.
And, we'd call up Dick and ask him how to make stuff, or, we'd get random job calls for these little indie movies and stuff, or TV shows, and Steve and I would occasionally get jobs like TV stuff, and we couldn't do it because we weren't in the union. So I had also met Fred Phillips at that interim at the Star Trek conventions, who was very kind to me, who was kind of like my mentor. And we would ask Fred, oh, hey, Fred, we got this job. We're going to make these things. Will you go put them on? He'd go, oh, sure, kids, whatever you want. So he would go put them on. And eventually, my first big film that I did was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and that was because of Fred Phillips. He called me up and he said, "Hey, V," he says, "you did a couple of movies with Bill Shatner, didn't you?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And he said, "Well, they're doing this movie, a Star Trek movie. Do you want to come and do it with me?" I almost passed out on the phone.
I'll pass on that.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Yeah, heck yeah, I want to do that. So that was my first big break, and which was really incredible. Robert Wise was director, huge director, and it was, it was a huge bloody movie. They had every stage at Paramount going,
Before doing Star Trek, I looked back at your first credits, Cinderella and Kingdom of the Spiders with William Shatner, which everyone knows William Shatner for Kingdom of the Spiders, right? That's when you think of.
Oh yeah, that's one of his biggest.
What was the experience like working on those, on smaller budget films and trying to figure it out? Because I have to imagine I mean, Star Trek, the motion picture was a huge project, like you said, probably
Yeah.
a big budget, big teams. What was it like going from Kingdom of the Spiders to, a large motion picture like that?
It was pretty darn cool. I don't know what else to tell you. I
Yeah.
mean, I had gone and worked on like weird little TV shows before
Mhm.
that because I was in the union, so I got to go do stuff. But, before that, I was always the department head because it's just the way it was. There wasn't a whole lot of makeup people back then. So I was always the department head. And when I went in to do Star Trek, I was part of a team, which was really cool because obviously I loved working. I loved Fred Phillips and I loved working with him. And his daughter was also there. She was one of the other makeup artists. What was so neat about it was like Fred was so giving and so willing to let us young people step in and do all the work and like get to do this stuff. Like he had me put together all the Klingons. There was 13 Klingons in that one scene where the ship blows up. And so he had me put all the guys were making everything. I put all the heads together. I painted them. And then he'd let me design all the hair pieces for them. So what that meant was there was like lace hair pieces, hand ventilated lace hair pieces for each character. So I took each character's hair and I put them all together and I dressed. There was also hair laid on the head pieces. So I dressed the hair on the head pieces, then I dressed the lace pieces into them and I pinned them together so that when the makeup artist came in to do the makeup, they could see how it all went together,
Right.
And I did the test on every single one of them myself. So I basically got to design all the looks on the Klingons. Wow. And that was really cool. When we were getting ready to do it, I'd done all the tests, like I said, on all the guys, and I was doing Mark Leonard and one of the head stunt guys, who was the guy that was standing over his shoulder talking to him during the scene. And then everybody else was doing all the other guys in the background. And I went to the background makeup artist and I said, hey, you guys, I've left some specific adhesive at your station. I'd like you guys to use don't use any of your weird concoctions because I don't want things turning and I don't want, things getting weird with the hair pieces because we have to reuse them every day and be easier to clean if you use this product I'm giving you. And of course, they totally ignored me. I was a girl and it was like, who the hell are you? And get the F out. You know what I mean? Basically. Yeah. And I went, okay, fine, whatever. I did my duty.
Right.
And one by one, each one of these guys came to me that I had done their makeup on when they looked so fabulous. And they said, V, can you fix me? Look what they did to me. And I look and these guys had combed out all the hair pieces and they were like straight back, like they'd been through a wind tunnel. And I went, what the heck? I mean, so I said, oh, no, I can't. I'm not touching anything. Oh, no, I'm not going there. Right. I said, don't worry about it, guys. You're going to be kind of slightly out of focus in the background and it's going to get real smoky and nobody will notice that your hair isn't the way it was when we did the test. I said, it'll be fine, guys. And of course it was, but
yeah. Star Trek, Star Wars. I mean, it's a size. I mean, both of those films, everybody knows, like they're familiar with them. They're popular. And it marks kind of the shift from, aliens and these weird makeups being a B movie trope in the 50s to being now. I have to imagine studios are going, how do we make the next Star Wars? How do we make the next Star Trek? How did that boost the industry? And did you find yourself now going from like, again, working on Star Trek now, there's all these different places that are calling for these. I have to imagine that was the environment at the time. Was that kind of the result or was it just
No, it was very much like that. Everybody started realizing, wow, we can actually really use this stuff and do more.
This is our blockbuster.
Make monkey faces and do, all these things. We can really start doing this. So there was like a huge boom in, makeup effects at that time. And it just got more and more and more, and more makeup artists started learning how to do it. And because it was like a whole different thing. Most people didn't really know how to put that stuff on. They knew how to build stuff out of their kits, but they didn't really know what this, foam latex thing was that you were going to stick on somebody's face. And back then we didn't have all the cool adhesives that we have now either. Yeah. We literally glued them on with spirit gum and we blended them in with Duo lash adhesive. Mm. And then we put Pax paint on top of them that Dick Smith taught us all how to make, and rubber mask grease paint on top of that. Yeah. And that's how we did them back then.
You've worked through so many shifts. I mean, you've got the 70s where sci-fi really took off in a huge way. You've got the 80s where you've got, the horror slasher world really coming into play. And then you've got the 90s where everyone looks really sexy in those slasher movies. And then you've got, all of these transitions that you've worked through. Do you look at any of those specific time periods as like the golden age where you go, this was where it was this perfect balance of like movie magic and the type of projects we're working on were incredible? Or does each one have its own thing that you appreciate throughout that journey?
There was a sweet spot in there when they just started to use CGI, and there was a little sweet spot in there that was kind of nice, but then of course they went bloody crazy with it and ruined everything for a minute there. But I believe that each one of those eras had its own little kind of niche, and they were all fantastic. It was like, it's great to look back. And I mean, I look at films that I did in the 70s and I go, my God, that movie still holds up. That's kind of crazy,
Yeah.
Because you have to remember also we were shooting on film, and film was very forgiving. It still made movies look like magic.
Yeah.
Now there's no magic left because with all the K's that they have going on, all these cameras, you can see stuff that the human eye doesn't even see. And it's really kind of taken the magic out of movies for me. Yeah. When you see things that clearly, it leaves nothing to your imagination, and there's still so many cool things that have come out of CGI. Like I love makeups that are built to be engineered with CGI, because then there's a purpose to it. It's just like when we did Pirates, we had on the Bootstrap Bill makeup, which was an amazing makeup that Joel Harlow did on him. And it was engineered so that they could add like little things spurting on his face, and just different things that moved. And then when you got into Davy Jones and all of his characters, like John Knoll did an amazing at ILM, he did an amazing job. He took our makeups and he made the CGI characters look like our makeups. So it was seamless. They all looked like they were in makeup.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely stunning. The first time I saw that Pirates film with Davy Jones and everything, I went to the premiere and I told Joel the next day, I said, oh man, everything looks fantastic. He kept asking me how Bootstrap Bill looked, and all I could say was, oh my God, Davy Jones was amazing. You wouldn't believe it. It looked just like a makeup job. And I'm like, and he goes, yeah, but how did Bootstrap Bill looked like freaking awesome, but you should see the CGI they did. It's like so cool. But they really took their time to, integrate the feels, and it really showed that they took the care in that. And that's probably the best. That's the film that I have seen that works, that particular type of thing works the best in, because even the next film wasn't as good. Yeah. The CGI wasn't as good in the next film because they thought, well, we've already done it. It's cool. We don't have to worry about it or something. I don't know what they thought, but
yeah. Well, it's always that we can do it, or we tested it. Now we can do more of it, and I'm glad you brought up CGI, because it's something where I just interviewed someone who works in VFX, and I was asking questions about practical and, VFX, and it's a hot debate in the industry world. It's a hot debate, with obviously moviegoers. I mean, you see that number one in the comments about Marvel movies. Oh, this looks fake, or this looks cheesy, or, it's a big complaint, but you talk positively in meshing the two, talking into that, like, how do you think CGI can be used effectively with makeup? I know you mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean, which I agree. I think those movies still hold up extremely well now. Why do you think
they're not that old, are they?
I mean, in movie terms, I mean, it's crazy to think, because if they made that movie now, I think it would be in a big, now it wouldn't even be a green screen. Now it would be a big room full of screens, like they're doing The Mandalorian. It would be all these different techniques, but to see that meshing of practical ships, practical characters, and then also these full CGI characters that still look incredible. It is a real sweet spot. And I'm curious, like, do you think still there's this room to mesh them in a way that's positive? Like, do you think that there's still a way to go back to that versus like going full bore into here's full CGI characters, or here's, then you'll see the other side, people go, let's go full practical. And then they're shooting it in a 4K or, 8K setting. It doesn't look quite as solid. I mean,
I think you have to use I don't know that they can do it in 4K unless they have, I mean, I did the Amazing Spider-Man, and that was one of the first time they used those 4K cameras. Our cinematographer, oh my God, he's fantastic. He did such an incredible job because there was a lot of prosthetic makeup on that film. And I was looking at it thinking, oh my God, this looks amazing. It doesn't, you don't see all that stuff because he knew what filters to use on it to make it look realistic. And it was, he had done such an amazing job, and all the other people were looking at it. They had DPs coming through that were going to go shoot Marvel films. They had them coming through the set and talking to John on the set to make sure that they were going to be doing the same techniques he did so that their films could look as good. So he did an amazing job, but it's not everybody takes the time, not everybody is as good as your technicians aren't as good as the next technicians, or it's just, I think somebody has to really be into their craft and really want to take the time to delve into it and see what works, do tests with it. Don't just, try to make, you're not doing a wildlife movie. You're doing a movie with people in it that are wearing makeup. You can't just expect everybody to be perfect all the time. And especially if you're doing films with prosthetics, you really have to know how to light them. You have to know what kind of filters to use. And there's so many beautiful makeups being done now with silicone prosthetics. It's just phenomenal. So it's like, I did a film called LBJ, and Arian Titan did the makeup. This was on Woody Harrelson. This was the second LBJ film now. And we went to go see a screening of it before they, finalized everything. And they had gone in and done digital touch-ups on all kinds of stuff that weren't supposed to be touched up. So Arian went to them and just said, oh, you guys, no, you took out, that's not right. You took out stuff that wasn't supposed to be taken out. I mean, and there was very little to be taken out. We really did an amazing job on this makeup. We were so we were being such perfectionists about it. We didn't want them to have to do that.
Yeah.
So he went back in with the director or the digital, whoever the digital artist was. And he said, no, remove that, and put it back to the way it should have been. I mean, there was like maybe 2 or 3 touch-ups they had to do. It was like the end of the day, maybe something was cracking down here. It was like nothing,
Yeah.
And so I think this is another thing, like a lot of makeup artists now are putting it in their deals that they want to do the beauty pass with the director at the end of the film. So if they're going to be doing any digital touch-ups, they want to have to say about it, which makes sense because you're going to know if something's wrong. I mean, what I do is I always go to the script supervisor and say, hey, today this is a problem here. Make a note here. So if they need to do digital touch-ups, this is what they should touch up, blah, blah, blah. So those are things that you have to, you have to have a really good rapport with your director and your DP and your script supervisor so that everybody can stay connected and know what has to be dealt with and talked about and maybe retouched at the end of the film.
Yeah, it's amazing how much this mirrors the conversation I've had with some VFX artists, where it comes down to the tool itself is a tool. At the end of the day, it's the same as what camera you're going to use. There's different techniques you can use to accomplish the same effect, but it's what you said. People don't take the time to make sure that everything else is working in tandem with it.
Right.
So you have an incredible effect, but it's not shot the right way, and it looks cheap, or you have something that's not an incredible effect, but it's shot really well and it looks great, And as far as your experience, I mean, you've had some people like Tim Burton you've worked with for many, many movies. You've worked with different collaborators over and over again. Who are some people you've worked with that you think really understand how to work with these effects and put your work in the best light in the different films and projects you're working on?
Like I said, I really loved working with John Knoll and ILM, and he was amazing, and he was such a great collaborator. But if you get a good DP, just look at their track record, look at the films that they've done, see how they shoot things, see, you have to get involved as a makeup artist. I feel that you have to be involved. You have to know who you're working with, get on that, get on your crew list and find out who these people are, what they did before. Is this cameraman like somebody that you think you can work with well? What's their reputation? Call up people they've worked with. It's really easy to do now. You have IMDb, you can cross-reference everybody. So there's no excuse not to know who you're working with and what their track record is and what films they've done and what actors or actresses they've worked with, and are they good at lighting? Do they care about it? Because a lot of DPs are just, I hate to say they're shit. All they want to do is light a room.
Mhm.
And what's a light? Oh no, we're using ambient light. We have fast cameras. I'm going, dude, you're in a close-up. This is your room now.
Yeah.
You've got to light that room.
Yeah.
They don't like ambient light. You know
Right.
what I mean? They want to be lit right, because especially, like some actresses have it in their contract that they have lines around their mouth removed.
Hmm.
I know several, but
Wow.
it's just, there's things that you have to know about, like, is there something, like I said, I'll go and talk to them ahead of time and say, I'm having a problem with this today. So we don't have to do CGI. Can you give them a cross light? Can you do this? Can you help with the dark circles? Can you give them an eye light? Anything, you have to know how to talk to these people. You have to know their lingo as well. So it's really important. And unfortunately for the young people, this is something that you just basically learn through experience.
Hmm.
But if you know what to look for, if you're knowledgeable, and and you do a little research, you can kind of figure it out. Like, look at old movies. How were they lit? How did that actress look so good? What did they do to her? You can tell by looking at something what they did.
Right. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
a lot of times they don't want to do it, but you can always ask. All they can do is say no.
Right. Well, I definitely want to ask a little bit on the practical side, and I want to talk a little bit about your academy. But I also am curious too. I mean, pulling up your IMDb, which if somebody's listening to this and hasn't, I mean, you've worked on, I mean, pretty much every major film that anyone's probably ever watched. I mean, your name is on so many different credits, so many different incredible films, and even for me, like I was already very familiar with you when I had reached out, and then when you said yes, which I was thrilled, I started looking through. I was like, let me start looking at some of the films you've worked on. I was like, oh, that too, and that too, and there's all these other pieces that I hadn't noticed. I'm curious for you. Do you have some projects that you've worked on where you feel incredibly proud of the work you did, but it doesn't get brought up a lot? Because I'm sure Batman Returns gets brought up quite a bit, and these other projects that are the big tentpole films get mentioned in interviews all the time. Is there any films you worked on where you're like, I crushed that movie and nobody ever talks about it?
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I look at my resume and I go, oh yeah, I forgot I did that one. Like, oh my God.
Means you're busy.
There was this one film that I really loved, which was an absolutely horrible experience for me, but I loved the makeup that I did on Carl Urban. It was called The Chronicles of Riddick.
Mm.
And I had gone in with David, the director, and we had designed all these really cool looks for the necromongers. And when they let the producer go, who was a friend of mine at the time, Peter McGregor Scott, they let him go, and they brought in these other executives from Universal who were just giant a-holes. And I had such a miserable time on the film, and I was doing all the special effects stuff. But I designed these bitchin' makeups, and the only one we got to do, because we shot for a week with him like that, was Carl Urban.
Wow.
And I mean, I had designed all these really cool things that, of course, the costume designer didn't want to deal with, but they were like pieces of jewelry that were embedded into their skin. So we were going to do all these really cool prosthetics that you could look like the jewelry was embedded into their skins. And of course, that never came to fruition. So I just had to figure out something else to do, which is why, I put this really cool, we shaved Carl's head. We did these plaits down his back and put all these hardware in it. But it was like a whole thing layered, and like I put luminescent colors into the makeup and stuff, so he like looked like he was almost like lit up, and just kind of translucent fish belly, kind of creepy looking, because they were supposed to be these half dead guys. But when it came time to doing all the rest of the guys, they said, well, the rest of them can't, that's way too scary. This is going to be our new tent pole. You can't make him look that scary. They can't be. I said, he looks amazing. What are you talking about scary? He looks beautiful and freaky and fabulous. And, and of course, no, nobody ever talks about it, but, because they turned the movie into pure shit, and that's what happened. And they never made another Riddick movie after that, because they were idiots. And the sets were like the sets. When you see that movie, that was not CGI. Those were actual sets. And I'm telling you, they were amazing. Those sets were so incredible on that film, those giant sculptures and stuff. Good God, they were the coolest things to walk in. And it could have been a really cool, wild, creepy movie. And this just shows you that production can ruin a film. And they did.
How do you really feel about it?
I hope none of those people are watching this. But you know
yeah.
what? I told you so.
Yeah, no, I mean it's you hear a lot of stories. I mean, the Thing remake, there was a similar situation where they had done all these incredible effects, and then they came in and production said, "Oh, CGI, and we'll go in and we'll just redo all of these effects." You look at, I mean, you worked on Priest, which I actually think is
Yeah, that was
so
a
I think
cool
it's an
film too.
underrated movie in some ways, but it again, there's some areas where the CGI goes a little bit too heavy in parts, but there's
Yeah.
some cool designs in it. It's interesting all the different elements that can make or break a movie and keep it from hitting that kind of magical peak. So
Yeah, you know, I can't remember if in the film they actually used the creatures that can be made, but there were green screen sets on stage that had these creatures in them. They were
mhm.
flying and stuff, and
Mm,
these creatures were so cool in person to see. So
yeah.
they could have had actual organic creatures in there, and I'm not sure that they ever used them. I can't remember now if we saw them or not, even for
Mm,
a split second, but
yeah.
they were really cool. And you know, I don't like this. I don't dislike CGI.
Yeah.
I just feel that if you can do something organically, it's usually much scarier
Mhm.
and much more realistic to do it organically, even if it isn't perfect, because who's to say what a monster looks like? You
Right.
don't know what a monster looks like. If and a lot of times when they do them CGI, I mean, look at Alien. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Alien was amazing.
Yeah. It's well, and
Yeah, they'd
it's
make that a god dang, CGI critter now.
yeah. Well, and it's I think it gives the actors something to work with that's there. And you
Absolutely.
you can feel it. I mean, you look at Star Wars has been the conversation a lot lately, and you can feel when someone's running around a blue screen, you can feel
Yeah.
eh, and you can just tell. And same thing, even some of the movies in the 80s, like these horror movies where, yeah, an effect doesn't hold up 100%, but it's still, there's something in our mind where we see that and go like, it's real though. This is a
Yeah.
something
It's
that's
still
there.
something that's actually in the room there.
It's
That's
not
creepy.
air,
Yeah.
there's not this weight to it. I want to ask really quickly before I throw some rapid fire questions your way.
Okay.
One of the things when we had a conversation a while back, you mentioned you wanted to talk about Instagram versus movie effects. And I'm sure now you're dealing with this up and coming group of people that want to get involved in makeup. They've, followed the journey of people like you that have done these incredible makeups for film, and they're figuring it out. They're trying to create these makeups for TikTok and Instagram,
Right.
and do all these horror effects and makeup techniques. And I wanted to just ask you, like, what are some of the common mistakes you're seeing people make now that are stepping into this world or trying to work their way into this industry?
A lot of them, what they do is they copy each other, which is unfortunate because you'll
Mm,
see the same kind of makeups over and over. And it's like, well, that's really great for if you're living in a cartoon world, but that
yeah.
doesn't look real. You know what I mean? And a lot of them just wind up throwing a lot of blood on everything and think that's cool. But no, you really need to see part of the wound so you can know where all this blood is coming from. And,
Mm,
and also, a lot of these kids, they have to start doing low budget films, first of all. They're
mhm,
not just going to jump into doing, a film that is a union film. I have kids that work with me all the time that have been trying to get into the union for years now, and
mm,
one by one they're getting in. Every young person that has been my assistant is all in the union now, and I
mm,
have my last one working on it right now.
mm,
So the gal that's working with me right now has been trying to get in for 3 years, and she's getting close to getting all of her days.
mm.
And it's so great, but it's hard work. They have to get a certain amount of days within a certain amount of years, and and if you don't get all your days in that 1 year, then they drop off and you have to start over. It's horrifying. It's
Yeah.
very, very difficult for them. You really have to want to do this really, really badly and really persevere. It doesn't just happen. You don't just like all of a sudden one day get in.
Yeah.
It takes years of perseverance and doing all these low budget shows and working for $100 a day, and working for other people. And then half the time it costs you to go do these jobs because they don't have money to give you supply money.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like you're almost paying for the experience to go work on a film.
Right.
So you really have to be dedicated to your craft to really want to do that. So as far as me seeing that transition from like right from TikTok and Instagram into the movies, I haven't really seen it. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah. Right.
Most of the people I've seen have like had some sort of education. You can learn a lot from Instagram and from YouTube and all that. There, you can really learn a lot, but at one point or another, you really have to be someone hands-on in a room.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that one-on-one, class, because it's just too difficult. That's why, like my school that I'm starting right now, it's going to be in 1 week pods. So if there's something like, even professionals have been coming. So if you want to do something where you just need to get touched up on, like, say, prosthetic application, you haven't done it in a while, and you want to just go see how to do that. Like next week we start on prosthetic application. The weekend after that, we're doing only silicone application.
Mm-hmm.
The week after that, we do ventilation, which is, hand tying hair to make hair pieces. So, and hair laying. So, it's like you can go in and just take one class and brush up on that particular class. So even somebody who's been working on YouTube that has gotten that far, they might want to come in and just say, okay, I got to go sit with a professional now. I got to be in a room having all the real stuff in front of me, all the real products to use, and the real equipment, because it really does make a difference to have all the correct equipment and all the right products, because products are not all, glues are not the same. I hate to tell you that, you guys, but they're not. So,
right.
It really helps to have that on hands, assistance there and instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for your academy, if somebody's listening and they're interested and they're in the area and they would be interested in checking out, what would be the best place to do that? And should they have any prior experience? Is it something where someone could come in at any level? What should be the level of expertise going into one of these classes?
Well, it would depend on which class they want to take. If you're coming in to do prosthetic application, it would certainly help to have at least tried it on your own, so you have some idea of what you're coming into. Otherwise, you're going to hold the whole class back, because sometimes you'll be going into a class that has professionals in it that have already done it.
Yeah.
We do start right off, right from the beginning. It's not like you couldn't catch on quickly. If you're a quick study, some of those classes would be very easy to do. And others might not be so easy, but we try to gear it so that most of the time people are not going to come in that don't have any experience whatsoever. You know what I mean? They're not going to come in. I've never touched a makeup brush, but I actually did have one student who had never actually made up another person. They'd only ever worked on themselves, and they hadn't actually ever touched another person with even a comb or a brush.
Wow.
And she wound up being one of my best students in hairline class. It was amazing. She caught on so quickly. And because of the fact that my classes are really small right now, because we're beta testing everything, you're basically getting a one-on-one with me. So if I have 6 students, I go around all day long to every single person. And if you don't get it, I'll either help you by taking your hand, or I'll do it for you right in front of you. And you go, oh, because sometimes it takes just that little bit to say, oh, crap, now I get it. Because, sometimes you can watch, but until you actually are there in person and see exactly what's going on. And also it helps to know why.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you're being taught something, they don't tell you why you're doing it. And for me, that always has helped me. It's like, okay, well, just go do this and that'll happen and this will happen. And oh, okay. No, why am I doing that way? Could I do it this other way? And I'll either say, yeah, you could do it that other way, but it might take you twice as long, because you're going to have to do this as well if you do it that way. So there's lots of different ways to getting to that location over there. But if you go this way, it's going to take you longer than if you just go that way, you know? Right. So there's it's that hands-on thing, to, being in that room and being with the person that really helps, the artist click in,
Yeah. Well, we're right near the end here. I like to save a little bit of extra time for a couple quick questions I ask everybody that comes on the show, and they always prompt stories. So this segment always gets longer and longer. But I'm really curious to hear your answer on each of these. Okay. First and foremost, just as a viewer, what do you think is the best decade of film history? What do you find yourself returning to the most?
Oh, that's not fair. God, I have so many favorite movies from so many different eras. I don't even know. I mean, if it was music, I'd say the 80s, but I could almost say that about film too. But, I think probably because the best time that I had doing movies was in the 80s. I'd have to say the 80s for me. It doesn't mean they were the best movies by far.
Right.
But I loved all the old Universal horror films too.
Yeah.
Those black and white films were so bloody scary. They were done in the 30s, some in the
Yeah.
40s. It's like, oh my gosh, how can you put I think it just depends on the genre of film too. You have to like think about what genre of film was very popular in that era, and how did they shoot them, and what made them so good, and what directors were really shooting a lot of films during then, and when was their heyday
Yeah.
in filmmaking, and I think that kind of has to go hand in hand for me, unfortunately. So I can't give you a clear answer there either.
No worries, no worries. That's a pretty common one, is like, oh, you can't do
Yeah.
this to me, make me choose. That's funny. Which of your films, this one's going to be no more easy. Which of your
No.
films do you think is the best representation of you as a creator?
Wow. That is really unfair. I don't know. They usually ask me, what's your favorite film? That's like saying, what's your favorite child? I can't
Right,
even do that.
exactly. Yeah.
My film as a creator, I don't know. I think I can give you this answer. It's not the exact answer that you wanted, but there was a set of films that I did where, as a makeup artist, you got to do everything that you ever learned to do as a makeup artist. And that was the Hunger Games, because we did everything from natural makeups to high fashion to trauma makeups to prosthetics. I mean, real strong prosthetic. We got to do every single thing we've ever been taught: dirt, blood, beauty, high fashion, everything imaginable. And those movies spanned everything.
Yeah.
So I think, as a makeup artist, those were the films that best used every technique I've ever learned in my entire career. So that would be my best answer on that. As far as creatively, I don't know. It was pretty creative. Yeah, it was fun and very creative. Yes, it was.
And that's why I like to ask, is because, favorite is a good question, but it is, I mean, there's so many factors. Like, is it your favorite, how it came out? But I like representation as a creator because it's something where you got to do what you do best,
Yeah. And that was everything. We did everything you can imagine on those films.
On the flip side of that, I'm going to throw in a curveball. On the flip side of that, is there a certain project where you went in expecting it to be a very creatively fulfilling project, or maybe to be this opportunity that's incredible, but you feel like you didn't get to really shine the way that you hoped? Like, was there any disappointments throughout the career where it was like, oh, I thought this film was going to be this amazing, amazing experience, and, kind of like Chronicles of Riddick, like it ends up getting cut out from under you?
That would probably be my answer right there, because I originally went in with Peter McGregor Scott, who was our producers on the Batman films, and he was always so terrific to work with.
Yeah.
And David Toohey was really an interesting director, and he was so willing to let us do all of these really fantastical things that have never really been done on a film. And then, production came in and put a kibosh on everything.
Yeah.
So that was kind of very disappointing. And they made our lives miserable on top of everything else. So
which doesn't help. Yeah. Oh, you mentioned the Batman films, which I have to ask. I mean, Michael Keaton's coming back as Batman, which is interesting, but
that's awesome.
I'm curious with Tim Burton specifically, because he's such an auteur director. He has his own specific style.
Yes, he does.
Were those creatively very open for you working on the makeups, or was it something where he said, like, I want it to look like this, and you felt like you were in this, like, what was kind of the working relationship there? Because I have to imagine he had his hands in it more than some directors, unless I'm misreading him as a director.
Just the main characters, because he basically designed the main characters. I mean, like, let's say the first film, The Penguin. He kind of drew a picture of what the Penguin was going to look like, and then Stan Winston and myself and the team jumped in and we made the Penguin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the rest of the characters were kind of left up to us, and we could do whatever we wanted. All the circus gang, he pretty much let me do what we wanted, and he said he gave us a theme, and I said, okay, I got it.
Great.
And then I went in and did some drawings for the clowns, and gave him pictures of the other characters, put a little board together, and he said, yeah, that's fantastic, and carry on, let us do whatever we wanted. But he, as long as we stick to the aesthetic that if he gives us a genre or something to work within, he's really good about everything else.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay. Well, that's two curveballs. So I'll go back to my regularly scheduled questions.
Okay.
if you were given the green light to remake any film, what would you choose and why? So this can be one of your past films, or it can be any film period. If you said like, it would be fun to do my spin on it, what would you choose and why?
Ooh, crap. That is a real spinner. Oh, wow. Not a film that I've done, but another film altogether.
It could be if you said I had one that I did, but I didn't have enough creative control, or it could be one that you like Planet of the Apes, where you want to take, a unique approach.
I don't know what I would like to do. Gosh. All my favorite films that I would like to do have already been done really well. So I wouldn't even.
Would you dare touch Planet of the Apes?
I wouldn't dare touch them. I mean, the Mummy. Maybe the Mummy.
Interesting. And would you like remaking the Boris Karloff or doing a totally
no,
spin?
I loved the Boris Karloff.
I do too. I love that movie.
And I think that is kind of gets blown over a lot of the times because you got the Wolfman, you've got Frankenstein.
Yeah.
But those makeups, we didn't get to see them a lot in the film, which was kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
But even, and also when you read about what it took to do those films, oh my God, it was like 10 hours putting them in and 2 hours taking them out of that one mummy thing with the wrappings and everything. Cause he actually wrapped him and all that stuff was soaked in mud, and he did all kinds of crazy stuff. He glued rice paper over his eyes, and oh my God. I mean, Karloff really, that was torturous for him,
Yeah.
But it would be really neat to recreate that kind of look.
Yeah.
But maybe not be so torturous.
Right. Maybe we could have some technology to take some of that away.
Yeah. And the Artist Bay makeup was really cool too. I love that. It was just, but that would be really cool to do it with a silicone, because that would look really creepy, because then it really would look like shriveled up skin, and that would be bitching.
Yeah, I really like the Brendan Fraser remake, but I love the original, and I love the makeup, and it's one of the first movies to really, have moving cameras going through. It's a very innovative film, but it does get lost because it's a slower burn than The Wolfman or these other films.
Yeah.
Great answer. What's a movie that people who are fans of your work would be surprised to know that you enjoy? Like a movie that you like watching that people would be like, I'm surprised. I didn't expect that to be a go-to pick for you.
Oh, I don't know, because I like watching.
You're pretty eclectic.
I like watching Lost Boys, but everybody likes watching that. So I was like, I don't know, but I had so much fun making that movie. It was like, for the longest time, people say, what was your favorite movie to work on? And I would always say Lost Boys. It was such a terrific time of life, and the kids were wonderful. The little kids were wonderful and so mischievous, and the boys were great. The vampires were great. I'm working in Santa Cruz, and Joel Schumacher, who I absolutely adored, who I did many films with as well. He made it fun to be at work.
Yeah.
And just the whole, and I love vampires. So that was really fun. So, you couldn't have asked for more, but I like watching that film. And I think it still holds up really well as well. So
greatest saxophone scene in history,
Yeah, exactly. He still does trade shows too.
Yeah, I saw he was at a
couple of years ago.
Yeah, he was at a convention playing, and I was like, man, still going at it. But vampires,
I reintroduced myself, and he goes, I remember you. You're the one that lubed me all up with the oil. And I went, yeah.
That's so funny. It's a great movie. I watched it for the first time. I think it was either last Halloween or the Halloween before, because I get in retro, I'll like watch Friday 13th a million times, and then I'm like, I gotta watch all these other movies on the list, and that made the list, and it was great. The last question I have for you, I ask everybody, what is the best piece of advice you would give to an aspiring filmmaker who is listening to this?
Wow.
Easy questions. I like to keep them all easy at the end.
You know what? If you truly want to do this for a living, you just have to persevere. You have to, you might have to give up stuff. And I hate to say that, but nothing comes without a cost. And it's like, to young women who want to get into the film business, the first thing I tell them is forget about having a family,
Mm.
because you'll just destroy it. I mean, it's a horrible thing to say to somebody, but I said, if you want to do this for a living and you want to be a makeup artist, and choose something simpler, like, do commercials, do short things, do stuff that doesn't take you away from your family for months on end. Because it used to be, back in the day, you could do it because you always went home at night, but now we don't go home anymore. Now we're
Yeah.
like on location all the time.
Yeah.
So, really, figure out what you want to do, what aspect of it you want to, as a makeup artist anyway. And just be ready for the long haul. If you really want to do it, you just have to persevere and really dig in and get to it, and learn as much as you can learn. Take as many classes you can take. If you have to take whatever you can take for free, and then, just learn as much as you can and be as versatile as you can. Learn how to ventilate, learn how to do something that not everybody, this is a good one. Learn how to do something that not everybody knows how to do, because it could make you get in the union.
Mm.
If they got really busy on somewhere and they needed somebody that not only did makeup but knew how to ventilate, you might get a job.
Great. That's great advice. Great advice. And visit the Legends Makeup Academy to learn all of these tips.
Academy.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to do this. I could ask a million more questions, and I really appreciate you having this conversation, and just for all of your contributions to films. I mean, it's interesting, like I said, going through your list of work and just thinking, like, I grew up watching all of these movies and seeing all these things, and even Face Off, like watching, that was a staple every night, watching all these makeup designs. And you're just a really fascinating person. And I really appreciate you taking time to do this.
Thank you very much. Very sweet. Thank
you.